Welcome to the channel. Today, we're exploring some unbelievable story. Stay tuned and let's dive in. Songs have a way of connecting to memories. I promise I will never hear Long Cool Woman in a black dress without seeing that rocking chair. It was a Malov handmade by Sam Malov before his death, and it cost my father $20,000 over 2 decades ago. It's not just ordinary rocking chair, it's a gorgeous piece of art made of Clara walnut that is masterfully shaped and very comfy. Despite my father's failings, it was the one valuable item he left me, and I still treasure it. So I got home to my Malibu house and heard music playing. The song started with reverberated, with guitar arpeggios building to a strong orchestration. It wasn't to my taste, but it was stunning. I followed the music into the family room, leaving my jacket behind to relax in my chair with a drink and perhaps some time with Samantha. She'd been irritable recently and we hadn't spent much time together in about 2 weeks. I came to a complete halt when I entered the family room. Samantha was in the Malov rocking chair, naked, in the midst of the performance with my bandmate Gregory. Both were using my favorite chair and I wasn't sure which bothered me more. Why was she with him? Holy cow, they are moving to the song's rhythm. Thank goodness it isn't rap, otherwise Gregory may have damaged his back. Gregory was utilizing the chair's design to his advantage as leverage. Then I pondered whether Sam Malov had anticipated his chairs being utilized in this manner. I'd be devastated if they broke the chair. I stood there for almost a minute and a half before Gregory spotted me and attempted to untangle himself from Samantha in the wheelchair. I was paralyzed and confused what to do. Confronting them would just exacerbate the situation and generate unwelcome media attention, not to mention jeopardizing the band's future. So what did I do? Nothing. I turned and went away, headed for the bedroom. As I buttoned a fresh shirt, I saw Samantha's image in the mirror. "Where are you going?" she said, avoiding eye contact. I attempted to grin but failed, instead looking at her. Samantha, once a teen darling and now a gorgeous figure, was my wife and is no more, it seems. "We didn't mean for it to happen," she remarked, sitting on the bed as I packed a duffel bag with clothing. When I'd had enough, I moved the bag to my drawer and added underwear and socks. "That's it?" Samantha inquired. "You're not even going to say anything?" I ignored her. Despite expecting to be enraged, I felt drained and dejected. It seemed like the wind had been knocked out of me. "Goddamn, David, say something!" she cried. "What do you want me to say?" I blurted, dropping the duffel bag. "Is there a guide for finding out that your wife and one of your oldest friends are having an affair?" Huh? Should I have been prepared for this? Maybe you could have dropped some hints. I was exhausted and wanted to leave the country. I hauled my duffel bag past Samantha, retrieved some items from the bathroom and loaded it into my Range Rover. Back at home, Gregory was tying his shoes on the rocking rocker. "Look, David," Gregory started, but I interrupted him. "I just want my chair," I said, scooping it up. I nodded at my Grammy Awards and framed LPs. "You and Samantha can box up my stuff." "Okay, where are you going?" Gregory inquired. "You're the point man for the negotiations, I told you." "You're not leaving, are you?" "Ship everything to my mom's house." "He'll handle things from there," I answered, dismissing him. I placed the chair into the Range Rover with several instruments and began to enter. "David," Gregory said, "please let me explain." I took a big breath. "So what is it that you didn't mean to happen? You ducking her or me catching you?" I didn't wait for an answer and drove away as fast as I could. I was 3 hours and nearly 250 miles west of Los Angeles, thinking Malibu would just fall into the ocean. The driver, whose voice was raspy from smoking, inquired where we were going. I informed him about Grant City, despite the fact that I no longer lived there. He giggled and asked whether I was simply fleeing, which I declined to respond. Finally, he remarked, "People like you always pick the wrong ones." I agreed, and he labeled me a shallow prick. I responded with a joke about his being equally as awful. The discussion was stalled, but I found myself wanting to stay with him for a little longer. We rode in quiet for 10 kilometers. He looked the same as before, with gray hair, a thick beard, a large chest, and arms pressed against his plaid shirt. I considered reaching out, but I knew it would be ineffective. I detected a slight odor of cigarette smoke mixed with Lagerfeld cologne. He eventually advised I approach the individual. I wondered what that would have altered, given that they both knew better yet did anyhow. He shrugged, claiming that it could have made me feel better than running away. I reminded out that confronting him would just end in sore hands, a tabloid disaster, and them remaining together in my chair. He reminded me that he had purchased the chair, but I informed him that it was now mine since he had died. He agreed, but said he would have kicked him. My mobile phone rang as we were merging from Interstate 15 to 70. It was about 11 p.m., and I was exhausted after driving for 8 hours. I responded to our lead guitarist, Ethan, who was yelling above the nightclub noise. He told me I needed to return because we were approaching a significant transaction that Michael couldn't manage alone. I told Ethan to let Michael handle it and switched off my phone. In junior year, I played rhythm guitar and lead vocals in Leadfoot, my high school band, with Charlie, Gregory, and Vince. Charlie got into alternative country music after hearing the Jayhawks in his room, which immediately drew me in. We spent hours in Hollywood Town Hall, and it always reminds me of that day every time I hear Two Angels. The next day, Charlie and I started writing music. The music was simple, but the words were difficult. Charlie's passion of poetry and old literature encouraged us, and we were quickly producing content. Charlie shifted his concentration to music, sometimes assisting with words. After high school, Leadfoot won a talent contest at the Lincoln County Fair, which earned us a berth at the Illinois State Fair. Despite a terrific performance, we finished second behind a tap dancing outfit, prompting crowd booing. Ethan Rose, a talent scout, contacted us after the concert and scheduled tryouts for Nashville and Memphis. By college, we had signed a record contract. Charlie quit the band, worried about selling out and losing his scholarship. Ethan then looked for a new lead guitarist. During Christmas break, Gregory, Vince, and I auditioned in Memphis and discovered John Bumer, a talented studio musician. He wasn't very good with lyrics, so I took over while Gregory and Vince played and sang. Our first album, Somewhere Down Highway 66, became multi-platinum, and Plain States was certified diamond platinum after selling over 13 million copies. Since then, we've depended on our triumphs. We are now negotiating a 5-album agreement with Columbia, who are suspicious of our long-term sustainability. I'm accountable for demonstrating that we have great stuff, yet our music library is lacking. Despite this, the band and Ethan feel we can get the contract, however Columbia is pushing hard due to our mediocre tunes. On Wednesday afternoon, following a lengthy journey across Nebraska, I slept at a Holiday Inn in Grand Island. Exhausted, I easily fell asleep, but was awakened by a worrisome dream concerning Samantha and the band. I awoke sweaty and discovered a call from Ethan. I told him I wouldn't be returning soon and that we should resolve things without signing anything yet. He was terrified I might leave the band, but I demanded he wait for my permission. Knowing that the matter may become public, I cautioned him to avoid making any agreements. I bathed, went back on the road, and arrived in Iowa that evening. I was still split between leaving the band and everything behind. Walter offered that if I was too afraid to approach Gregory, I should let the band deal with it rather than go, reminding me that I'd still have everything, my band, fame, money, and the opportunity to get vengeance on Gregory. I considered resigning anyhow, but Walter ridiculed the idea, saying I'd remember what it was like to be at the top and then lose everything. I saved his remarks as future lyrics. As we traveled across Iowa, Walter said that his absence from writing was not because of Anna, but because he had lost concentration owing to the celebrity lifestyle. He finally resumed contact with his family via his latest novels, but recognized that forsaking them was part of the process. He said that ditching Samantha would be a good idea, not just to refocus, but also because she is self-centered, something he told me about before we married. That was the final discussion we had before he perished in a rock climbing accident. He had said the same about Samantha. After that, I hung up the phone and did not communicate with him again until he died a year later. Walter believed that ditching Samantha would help me redirect my energy. He said that removing distractions such as booze and women, except Anna and Susan, had helped him rediscover his literary talents. I knew he was speaking the truth. His post-divorce works, notably the one about a disintegrating family, mirrored his self-criticism and depicted me and Mom in a sympathetic way. I questioned if getting rid of Samantha would help, particularly since the band was not very supportive. Walter told me to enjoy my luck and quit if I wished. He advised me to keep myself engaged with something significant in order to avoid becoming a has-been recalling previous achievements. I was finally in Illinois, which wasn't any better than Iowa or Nebraska, when my phone called. I paused before responding. Samantha's voice came through, asking whether I was present and imploring me to speak. I got right to the topic and asked how long the affair had been going on. She skirted the subject, complaining that she preferred to address it in person rather than over the phone. I told her I did not want to meet right now. She inquired where I was and offered to come to me. I don't want you coming over, I told you. I need some time to sort things out. You can take a break now, honey, she said. You're now in the midst of your new record contract. Gregory and the lads are quite worried. Seriously, I yelled into the phone. I find you and Gregory together, and you're just concerned with my band duties. What are your obligations to me? Can we talk about it for a moment? Samantha, screw you, she said. Grow up, David. You often sleep with groupies, so what's the big deal if I have some fun on the side? It's not like you're meeting my needs. That's bullshit, and you know it, I said. I have not been with a groupie since our first tour. I didn't know you then, and I haven't been with anybody else since we met. How many times do I have to tell you this? How about Tracy? She shot back, referring to her younger co-star. Remember those photographs from the Inquirer last year? Are you going to refute that, too? I took a deep breath and tried to remain cool. We've discussed this a million times. Nothing occurred. We bumped into each other in a club. She was inebriated and several men were pestering her. I just gave her a ride home. That's it. And I'll tell you again, she said. That is a damn lie, and you know it. She was all over you. She was completely intoxicated. I said, you saw her legs give out, damn it. David, just come back here, she implored. Her emotions seemed sincere, and sobbing on cue was her one true flaw as an actor. I'm sorry, I said. I can't handle it right now. We will chat later. All right. Don't hang up on me, she begged. I stopped the conversation nevertheless and turned off my mobile phone. After I hung up, we met backstage at the With the People festival. Leadfoot was playing just before the Eagles' so-called last reunion tour, and Samantha was the celebrity who introduced us. That was 5 years ago, and we were both at the pinnacle of our professions. Samantha rose from a minor position in campus life to a main role in a popular series while still a child star. She transformed from a tomboy to a lovely young lady adored by admirers. Despite her innocent on-screen persona, her off-camera life was wild, often involving high-profile Hollywood individuals and compromising photographs. However, she avoided medications and drank little, keeping tabloids at bay. Samantha contacted me after a high-profile festival performance with Leadfoot, dressed in tight jeans and a western shirt. She flirted and asked me out. I agreed, and after a spectacular second set, we spent 3 days together in my hotel room before flying to Fiji for another 10 days. I fell for her when she taught me to sip beer via my nose, and we married a year later. Despite the demands of filmmaking, traveling, and public attention, we fared better than most until lately. Returning to my mother's home after 7 years, I saw everything was exactly as I recalled. I called out to her, and she arrived, welcoming me cordially despite her disorganized look. When she saw my condition of distress, she inquired if I was interfering with anything, and I volunteered to stay at a hotel overnight. Mum summoned her current partner, Dr. Dan, down from upstairs. To my astonishment, he was much younger than she. Mum joked that his age allowed him to keep up with her. Dr. Dan welcomed me pleasantly, and I apologized for my sudden visit. He appeared really happy to see me. Mum informed me that their relationship was ended, and Dr. Dan's warm gaze proved it. Mum saw I hadn't eaten properly in over 40 hours and prepared my childhood favorite, grilled cheese and tomato soup. While she prepared, Dr. Dan and I sat at the table and discussed Grant City news. Dr. Dan inquired about Samantha, and I strained to smile. Dr. Dan then indicated that Samantha and I could be cheating. I told Mum about Samantha's romance with Gregory Simpson, to which she answered sharply. Her candor, like Walter's, was refreshing. Mum's candor caught Dr. Dan off guard, and he almost choked on his soup. Mom chastised Gregory Simpson's phony charm and risky actions behind closed doors. Dr. Dan inquired about my intentions, and I said that I needed to remain with Mom to rest and clear my mind. Mom agreed if Dr. Dan was all right with it. I learnt that Dr. Dan had separated from his prior partner, Elaine, and was now living with Mom. Mom hadn't mentioned anything, and it seemed reasonable that Dr. Dan and Mom would meet on New Year's Eve after a few drinks. Given Mom's charm and beauty, it was no surprise that Dr. Dan was drawn to her. I giggled as I asked Dr. Dan if I might remain with them. His stern expression made me giggle more, forcing milk to flow from my nose. After a snooze, I discovered a message from Mom stating that she was gone for the evening and Dr. Dan was at the office. I didn't want to be alone, so I went to the hitching rail, where I used to work. The crowded parking lot and bustling dining room demonstrated that they were still providing superb meals at the bar. Linda, astonished to see me, gave me a hearty embrace. She and her husband Jake ran the hitching rail for almost 30 years and loved their employees like family. Linda stated that it had been too long since our previous meeting and sent me to the kitchen to see Jake. Jake, despite being busy and tidy in the kitchen, hugged me and complimented my beauty, laughing at my California joke. He promised to provide me with a decent lunch. Linda sat me at a tiny table and directed to a redhead working at the waitress station. I recognized her as Grace, who had not altered much in 10 years. The restaurant was full with familiar people, which made it feel like home. "Hey, Grace," I said, astonished. Grace swiftly accepted my drink order and then left to cater to other customers. She returned with a new beer, replaced the empty bottle, and departed again. Grace was my high school infatuation, but all my attempts, she never noticed me. She was focused and distant, staying with her circle of intelligent students. I had previously worked as a chef at the hitching rail when she started there. I appreciated her professionalism and guarded manner, even though I had attempted to chat to her and was turned down. Jake subsequently said that Grace's timidity stemmed from her parents forcing her into the profession to assist her overcome it. Months later, receiving a quick hello from Grace before college was a highlight for me. I questioned Jimmy Schultz about Grace as we sat at the bar. Jimmy, now an insurance salesman, informed me she married a quiet engineer who abandoned her for a male colleague. Grace was back in town, working part-time at the bar while also teaching English. She wasn't seeing anybody and didn't seem interested in dating. I went to buy us another round and noticed a lack of cocktail waiters. I also questioned Jimmy about Charlie. He still remains in contact with Charlie, who lives on Foster Road, is married to Jenny, has 2 kids, and teaches English at the high school. Charlie sometimes performs in a bar band, which was hilarious given that he quit Leadfoot to flee the atmosphere. Jimmy's reply helped me understand that Charlie was better living a simpler life, which he had always chosen. Unlike me, Charlie had escaped the craziness of celebrity and established a satisfying regular existence. He fared better than I did, and he appreciated Jenny's company. As Walter and I headed home, he sensed my depression. I mentioned that I was thinking a lot, not only about Jimmy's words, but also about how disconnected I'd been feeling recently. I saw that my mother was from a little village, but Walter's family was from Chicago's elite. We came from contrasting worlds, rural town versus fancy. Walter agreed, but I added that his actions, such as sleeping with starlets, emphasized the disparity. Jimmy's words helped me realize that Charlie's small-town existence, which I had previously regarded through a Hollywood lens, really made him happy. Despite my fame and fortune, I felt hollow, even if I had a celebrity wife and my closest buddy felt like a ghost. Walter began appearing to me a year after his death during a concert in Dallas. At first, I assumed it was a terrible trip, but he was too genuine and our chats were too clear. I finally visited Dr. Salomon after months of uncomfortable private discussions. Initially, physicians suspected pill residue, but testing revealed nothing. Dr. Salomon ruled out schizophrenia and said that I was experiencing a symptom of my past, a means for my mind to cope with stress and unresolved difficulties, especially with my father. Walter then served as a stand-in for the absent report. Dr. Salomon's explanation made sense. He thought that visiting Walter was a good approach for me to deal with my stress and that I would eventually have internal conversations. I felt better until Walter resurfaced, ridiculing Dr. Salomon's idea and divulging information about his long-lost novel, which was released to great acclaim 8 months later. After a few drinks, some decent talk, and a massive bacon cheeseburger, I slept comfortably. Friday morning, I felt energized and saw my old joyful self in the mirror. Even the 23 unopened voicemails did not dampen my spirits. I had yogurt and coffee before spending over 11 hours making music inspired by a tale about Lennon and McCartney. Dr. Dan came over for lunch, but I was too engaged to take a break. I filled half of my notepad with fresh ideas. When Mom and Dr. Dan went out for a fish fry, I kept working on a new tune. It wasn't ideal, but it came close. I got dressed leisurely and headed to the hitching rail, arriving late to a crowded pub where the band was playing a catchy Sincere song. Linda took me into the kitchen, where Jake was cooking supper and making jokes about California destroying me. Grace, blushing and avoiding eye contact, was instructed to get me a drink. Her aroma remained as she departed. Victoria and Jake glanced at me, and I mumbled about how nice Grace looked. Jake quipped that I needed to develop a pair, which made me giggle. After my dinner, I went to the bar and saw Jimmy Schultz speaking with Jenny Cooper, previously laden, who looked much like she did at prom, except with a little more weight and a few wrinkles on her face. I offered to purchase drinks as the song finished. Jenny grabbed me warmly, happy to see me, and Jimmy nodded, saying he'd handle the drinks since I'd be busy. Jenny requested if I'd perform a song with Charlie and his band, claiming it would be very meaningful to the college boys who remembered prom and her begging eyes. I couldn't refuse. I agreed, and Jenny soon notified Charlie. Charlie's announcement that I would be joining them drew everyone's attention. The audience, which was acquainted to me, seemed shocked and enthusiastic. Charlie made a light-hearted introduction, questioning my guitar talents but recommending I sing. The crowd's enthusiasm was apparent, and I felt compelled to reunite with these dear people. Climbing onto the platform, I gave Charlie a hearty poke and embrace, savoring the warmth of our reunion. Charlie recommended we get started, so I grabbed up an acoustic guitar. After a fast setup, we agreed on Two Angels, which begins with a piano lead and progresses to my guitar, drums, bass, and Charlie's slide guitar. The song had an outstanding piano performance and a prolonged instrumental. By the end, it seemed like we hadn't been apart. Charlie's voice sounded better than I recalled. After the cheers, Charlie introduced me to the audience and I requested to remain on stage. We launched into Bob Dylan's Lily Rosemary and the Jack of Hearts, improvising the arrangement with Charlie's guitar licks and the piano sparkling. The venue was filled with people dancing and flowing in. I remained on stage, joined the band during breaks, and signed autographs. We performed several Leadfoot songs as well as country rock oldies. By the final hour, the crowd was bursting, and we finished with a harmony-filled rendition of Poco's Keep on Trying, which enthralled the audience despite our strained voices. After assisting with the deconstruction, receiving free drinks, and watching the bartenders clean up, we ended with a last beer in the gloomy barroom with Jake, Linda, Jenny, Charlie, and the band. Jake recommended we do this more often so he could retire someday. Suddenly, I heard Grace's soft voice behind me. We met eyes, and I was dumbfounded. Jenny teased, while Jake grumbled about California destroying me, which made Grace grin before complimenting the performance and leaving. Charlie and Linda mocked me for still having emotions for Grace, while Jake said I was too timid to act. Jenny urged me not to get too close, since Grace had gone through enough. Linda observed my response when my marriage was discussed and whispered to Jake, who nodded and acknowledged my concerns. Charlie inquired about my intentions for the next day, and I suggested writing. Jenny invited me to a barbecue at their place, indicating that Grace and her kid would be there. I agreed, pleased by the notion. Charlie believed it would be beneficial for me to hang out with regular people. We had no idea how unusual the following day would be. In Grant City, I slept in until almost 11 a.m. on Saturday, only to be awakened by Mom shrieking about strangers on her yard. It was the media and supporters. I hurriedly prepared, knowing I needed to appear flawless to prevent reports of a pill binge or scandal. I joined Mom on the porch 15 minutes later, beaming at her while facing the reporters and cameramen. I escorted the reporters to the sidewalk and then onto the porch, following the norm of women first and then left to right. The first question from Entertainment Tonight was about my popular videos with Charlie Cooper and if I was quitting Leadfoot to join a new band. I explained that I had no intentions to leave Leadfoot, I was only visiting relatives and supporting an old buddy. Another reporter inquired about leaving mid-record discussions. I said that our boss, Ethan Rose, was managing everything and I simply wanted a break. When questioned about the rumors surrounding Samantha Boyd and Gregory Simpson, I informed them that Samantha and I were great and that I was just taking a break. After half an hour of questioning, I stayed with my tale. The reporters thanked me, apologized to Mom, and then went to edit the film. I told Mom I was going to Charlie's picnic, and she and Dr. Dan may stop over later. I put my instruments into the Range Rover and drove a circuitous route to escape the reporters, arriving at Charlie's at 12:30. Charlie welcomed me and took me to the terrace, where he was cooking. Nearby, children were playing in the pool. Charlie said that he dealt with reporters that morning by threatening to call the police. I chuckled and wished I had done the same. I got a Diet Pepsi and sat on a lawn chair. Charlie joined me after I finished cooking the pork shoulders. We spent the next 20 minutes conversing, catching up on life, and watching the kids in the pool. Charlie informed me about who was married, had children, and where they worked. We had a serious discussion regarding the last 6 years. Charlie inquired why I was returning, and I first skirted the subject by concentrating on some oak trees. I eventually asked him whether he was pleased. He replied he was, and I answered I wasn't sure. It seemed to be what I wanted, but suddenly it felt overpowering. Charlie recommended me to just go, but I stated that it was not easy owing to my band duties and my wife's refusal to relocate here. When questioned about Samantha and Gregory, I verified the reports. Charlie said that Gregory had done something similar with Jenny years before, but she had turned him down. I told Charlie I was ambivalent about Samantha, I loved her but was afraid of change. He advised I chat to Samantha to figure out why it occurred, which would help me determine if it was a one-time error or something that may happen again. He also made a joke about celebrities' tolerance for such stuff. Charlie's counsel was more straightforward than Walter's. He told a tale of someone who met their spouse via someone else and learned she was just seeking for someone new before terminating things. He said that if there is true love, it may be worth attempting to heal problems rather than giving up right away. Jenny's voice broke in when she overheard Charlie's metaphor about repairing a lawnmower. Charlie reassured me that only I could determine if my marriage was salvageable, emphasizing that many couples go through difficult times and eventually find happiness. I went to fetch some beers and saw Jenny and Grace making supper. When I walked in, they stopped moving. Jenny eagerly embraced me, but Grace avoided eye contact and whispered a greeting. It seemed that they had overheard my talk with Charlie, which concerned me. Back on the deck, I passed out drinks and got into a dispute with Will over Warren Zevon versus Ray Charles. We concluded that although Zevon was varied, Charles excelled in jazz. As more people came, we headed to the pole barn to perform some music. Charlie invited me to play Time to Start Again, one of our old songs about repairing a broken relationship. I stood up on a stool and played the song, seeing Grace moving to the music and keeping a careful eye on me. When the song finished, the room became quiet. Grace, now a blazing scarlet, was visibly touched. Will proposed a break, so everyone left for drinks, leaving Grace and me alone. Grace apologized for overhearing my conversation with Charlie and stated she knew what I was going through. I tried smiling, but it felt weird. She inquired about the music, and I told her I hoped it would lift her spirits. I then performed If I Only Had a Brain from The Wizard of Oz. Grace chuckled despite her tears, even joining in at the end. I encouraged her to sit alongside me, and she accepted after some reluctance. I inquired about her small child in the water, and her face brightened up when she said Brighton. We spoke as I played, and I saw she was more relaxed. It was time to say something I'd been avoiding for years. I stopped playing and put my arms over the guitar, trying to express something I'd been keeping back for a long time. Grace's expression became serious and she acknowledged to have similar sentiments since I invited her to homecoming. She confessed that she was afraid and wished she had said yes at the time. She had pondered how things may have been different, particularly after her divorce. I was surprised and Grace pushed me to speak out. I whispered in amazement and we both smiled at the silliness of the situation. But then Grace grew serious again, making it obvious that she did not want to be the other woman. She stated that if I wanted to leave my wife, she would not be involved in the choice or connection. I agreed, conceding that after all this time, it felt nice to converse honestly. I didn't want to complicate things anymore, particularly with someone I hardly knew. Our chat was cut short by the sound of a helicopter landing nearby, indicating that more troubles were on their way. Grace and I waited outside, watching as the helicopter landed a few hundred feet away. Charlie's small kids raced up eagerly, calling the visitor Uncle Ethan. I was startled they knew him so well and felt guilty for not sticking closer to Charlie. Ethan stepped from the chopper and assisted Clark Harper, the Columbia executive in charge of our deal. I swore behind my breath. I had planned to avoid him throughout this trip. Grace observed my response and inquired if I knew Clark. I nodded and headed over, accompanied by Charlie, who was relieved to see Ethan but perplexed by my wrath. Ethan welcomed us enthusiastically and asked if they could attend the celebration. Charlie greeted them and introduced Clark, but I ignored their handshakes and stared. Ethan attempted to defuse the situation by bringing up the popular video from the night before. Clark apologized, stating that the situation with the video and the allegations regarding Samantha and Gregory had grown critical. He asked if we could bring the rest of the band out here for a brief meeting. Charlie said they were at the home and I attempted to dismiss it, but Clark pushed, emphasizing the gravity of the situation. Ethan turned to me, evidently upset. He said that Clark's supervisors and the whole city of Los Angeles were aware of the situation and that the word was likely to spread rapidly. They were apprehensive to continue negotiations with Leadfoot because Gregory's drama rendered the transaction too risky. Even though I was contemplating resigning, I understood my career may be jeopardized if we didn't solve this right away. I did not want to limit my alternatives too much. Clark interrupted my thoughts, adding that the situation had deteriorated overnight but had changed as the video began to trend online. Charlie and I led Ethan and Clark to the pole barn, where Charlie proceeded to get the rest of the band, Will, Rob, and Steve. I watched as they arrived, each with a combination of nervousness and excitement. Will was towering and moody. Rob was strong and had a crew cut, whereas Steve was simple and down-to-earth. Charlie appeared curiously delighted, and I knew what was coming. Clark began talking about the attention from last night's performance, implying huge news. Ethan urged him to continue, and Clark stated that Bob Dylan had phoned to compliment our performance of Lily Rosemary and the Jack of Hearts. Charlie appeared unconcerned with the news, but I was visibly astonished, particularly seeing Will and Steve so happy. Regardless of personal preferences, Bob Dylan's appreciation is highly valued in the business. When Dylan talks, record execs pay heed, particularly given his new rebranding. Clark requested to see what we had, and Charlie consented, but was dubious. Clark wanted to watch us perform uninterrupted, so we added 4 additional songs, a mix of energetic pieces, a ballad, and a medium-tempo piece. Clark filmed everything using a camcorder, which, although not flawless, was preferable than a shaky YouTube post. Clark thanked us, declined the meal, and promised to call the following day before departing in the helicopter. Ethan stayed for the party, and I was astonished at how well everyone knew him. My regret for not remaining in contact with Charlie deepened when Mom stated that she had assisted in recruiting Will, Rob, and Steve from Chadwick College. She had just approached the music instructors for references and referred them to Charlie. An hour later, Charlie and I were in the kitchen, slicing pork shoulder for sandwiches. He gave me some plastic bear claws and demonstrated how to use them as we worked. Charlie indicated that he was really contemplating something, but did not go into specifics until Ethan arrived. Ethan and Charlie exchanged looks before Ethan followed us, dismissing my queries and grabbing another set of bear claws. Ethan knew his way around the kitchen, which surprised me. As we shredded the pork in quiet, I waited for Charlie to explain what was happening. Ethan broke the quiet, saying that Leadfoot had been suffering since their second album. While our success kept us selling millions and filling venues, our songwriting had deteriorated. He said that he had traveled in to meet Charlie approximately a year after our Grammy triumph, observing a decline in quality and hoped Charlie would continue to write. I was astonished to learn that Charlie was still writing. Ethan stated that Charlie's new material was only appropriate for record filler, not smashes. Charlie had been attempting to get Ethan to bring us back together, but it never occurred. When I inquired why they hadn't contacted out sooner, Ethan said that they attempted to contact me at a hectic time for our last album, Cactus Rose. When I pushed him further, Charlie revealed that he got my most recent set of songs 5 months ago during the American tour and had rewritten the majority of them. I was first happy, but my grin soon faded as I waited for additional information. Ethan confessed that the tunes we were discussing were mine and Charlie had no involvement. He had just lately viewed my rewrites and acknowledged that they were improved but still not quite perfect. The problem was that he discovered about Gregory and Samantha soon before receiving the revised music, so he knew about it for 2 months without informing me. I was enraged, unable to prevent my hands from pounding the counter. I approached Ethan and Charlie, wanting to know why they had not told me sooner. Charlie answered that I hadn't contacted him in 6 years and had declined his wedding invitation, so he didn't see the need in informing me. Jenny interrupted our fight, telling us that we had visitors outside who didn't need to hear our drama. We shyly returned to slicing the pork, while Jenny put on a happy face for the visitors. I told Charlie I had never seen the invitation and felt terrible about how I treated him. He told me I needed to work things out with Samantha, and even if he couldn't forgive her, he believed I should make my own decision. I then questioned Ethan whether it was just about the money. He told me it wasn't, that he cared about me as a brother and didn't want me to lose everything without a backup plan. Charlie pointed out that Ethan had informed me, but Ethan emphasized that he had halted the discussions early due to a tip regarding Gregory and Samantha's meeting. He didn't want me to believe him over Samantha or Gregory, so he didn't bring it up. Ethan indicated that his objective was to help me remain in the band and further my career, even offering to assist locate a replacement bass player. Charlie confirmed that he was in on the plot. This was a lot to digest and I was upset, but I couldn't blame either of them. Ethan had been watching out for me in Leadfoot, even if it was mostly for his personal benefit. I inquired as to what the afternoon was about. Ethan noted that the viral videos were much more popular than predicted. They were receiving tens of millions of clicks, and even Bob Dylan took note. Columbia was eager to capitalize on this, and Clark recognized the value in rejoining us. If Ethan had showed him the rewrite sooner, we could have already signed the contract and be dealing with throwing Gregory out. My rage subsided, replaced by a smile. Gregory was in big danger now. Ethan confirmed Gregory was almost broke, which startled Charlie. Ethan remarked that Gregory spent more than he earned and did not have songwriters like us. Gregory had magnificent properties in Aspen, New York, Malibu, and even London. I giggled at the idea of Gregory pursuing London ladies. We finished shredding the meat and began preparing the trays. I apologized to Charlie, who confessed he may have been too harsh. He had sent the wedding invitation to my former address on purpose to keep things low-key, which made me chuckle. We took the trays outdoors and I saw Grace watching me. Charlie approached, kissed her forehead, and muttered something. She smiled at me, and I wished I had been the one to console her. I stood alone, drink in hand, wondering about Samantha's adultery, which was most certainly continuing. I thought I'd ever get over it, but I chose to listen to her. After 5 years together, I wanted to comprehend the entire scope of what had occurred. Grace's fingers on my shoulder interrupted my thoughts. She inquired about my mood, and I quoted a line from my father, "Some days you're the pigeon, and some days you're the statue." Her laughing was bright and genuine, and seeing her in such high spirits made me glad. However, the following morning, Walter's whining roused me awake. It was soon after 9, and he informed me that Samantha had gone on morning programs disparaging me. I believed I was dreaming until he threw the covers off of me. I raced to prepare as he warned that the journalists would be there shortly. In the kitchen, Dr. Dan and Carol were already on edge. Carol inquired if I had heard the news, and when I confirmed it, she wanted to know whether it was genuine. I told her that it wasn't. Dr. Dan touched my shoulder, confirming what had already informed her. The phone rang, and Carol gave it to me. Ethan was on the telephone and sounded abnormally enthusiastic. He told me Samantha's team had gone public, presenting her as the victimized party. I was upset and perplexed. Why did she have to approach things this way? It exacerbated an already terrible situation. I inquired how he meant to handle things, but he said he'd tell me when I arrived to Charlie's apartment. He instructed me to wait until the media arrived and then drive out to Charlie's place so they could follow me and not disturb my mother. Charlie informed me that his family was okay with it. Half an hour later, I arrived to Charlie's, trailed by a line of news vehicles that kept off his land. Inside, Charlie showed me a chat program where Samantha was being interviewed. The presenter, in a phony genuine tone, inquired about problems in our marriage. When Samantha's grin faded, the host pressed her further, inquiring about reports of her meeting Gregory. Samantha said gently as the camera focused on her painful look. "Gregory and I are just friends," she said. "He's helping me through a tough time." The interviewer was eager. "What's happening in your life right now?" Samantha's tone became firm. "David has been having affairs," she said. "Gregory informed me, and although I was suspicious, my agent, who is also a close friend, verified it. David's infidelities are real." The interview pushed. "How many women?" "I'd rather not say," Samantha said. "When I addressed David last Wednesday, he departed. I have not seen him since." Charlie, who had been watching, switched off the television, appearing disappointed despite his attempts to grin. In contrast, Ethan smiled. "Looks like things have changed," he remarked. I understood the conversation with Samantha was off. She had pushed my hand, so I decided to play the cards she handed me and remove her out of my life. Ethan laid out our options. "We can let her get away with this, or we can bury her." I raised an eyebrow and waited for him to clarify. "I've documented everything from the start," Ethan added. "We have photographs, videos, and affidavits. Following our conversation yesterday, I have folks in LA looking into it further. We could have additional information shortly." I was astonished. "Is there more?" "Yep," Ethan said. "She has been with various co-stars. Many of the actors and crew are aware and eager to share." I felt a cold. This was standard Hollywood, but I never imagined my wife was a part of it. The veneer of America's darling has been broken. "So what happens now?" Ethan asked. I saw Charlie clenching his jaw uncomfortably. "Bury the witch," Jenny yelled from the kitchen. I chuckled. "Do you agree?" I asked Charlie. He nodded. "Talking will not help. You have all the answers regarding your marriage, so let's talk about our possibilities." I told Ethan, "If we don't do something, your career will suffer." Ethan's response, "New record negotiations for Mustang Ranch could be tough." "Come on," I urged, "it happens all the time. It didn't harm Mick Jagger, right?" Ethan laughed. "True, Mick Jagger was always seen as the bad guy. But you've been the quiet, contemplative poet, the decent man. If you do not fix this, you risk damaging the image. Columbia will see it as a danger to millions. Your crossover appeal is massive. Rock fans may not care, but churchgoers in tiny communities will." I looked out at the press supporters and then back at Ethan. "Okay, how should we address this?" Ethan smiled as he opened his briefcase. 20 minutes later, Charlie had the press set up in the pole barn. When I stepped in, the press immediately started asking me questions. When everybody calmed down, I added, "Same rules as yesterday, ladies first, then men," from my left to right. I pointed to the young reporter who had gone first the day before. "Sorry, you went first yesterday," I remarked, addressing the well-dressed reporter who had come in second. "Mr. Harlan," she said, plainly irritated about my earlier evasions or infidelities. "Miss Lockhart," I said with a wounded grimace. "Your wife told Valerie Plymouth that you ruined your marriage by having multiple affairs. Is there any truth in these allegations?" she asked. I took a big breath, established eye contact with the reporters, and was ready to speak. "I regret to say Samantha was partially right," I said. Flashes from cameras temporarily blinded me, allowing me to maintain a painful face. "Our marriage is indeed over, but she was wrong about me being unfaithful." I removed papers from an envelope and addressed the reporter from Entertainment Tonight. "Your turn, Miss Miller. Are you claiming you've never cheated on your wife?" she asked. "Not once," I responded. "If Samantha has any proof otherwise, I'd like to see it." I stopped, allowing the moment to settle. Until Wednesday afternoon, when I discovered her with one of my oldest friends in our house, I believed my marriage was ideal. Clearly, I was mistaken. "Are you saying she was the one who cheated?" questioned a male reporter as cameras closed in. "That's exactly what I'm saying," I agreed. "Have you got proof?" demanded the first reporter. I went to the next guy and said, "Do you have any proof to back up your claims?" he asked. I held up the paperwork. This report from A&R Investigations of Malibu will show that Samantha was not truthful this morning in what she said. In what ways did she lie? Asked another reporter. She'd been having an intensely physical relationship with Gregory Simpson for at least the past 2 months, I said, my voice quivering. I stopped, relishing the moment as the scorned spouse. This report includes dates, timings, photographs, and more. And it looks that this is not the first time this has occurred in our marriage. Are you aware of any others? Someone yelled. I don't want to go into further details, I remarked as I reinserted the report into the envelope. My manager will provide a redacted version soon. I loved my wife dearly and believed she loved me. I've been loyal from the beginning. It's a terrible shock to find that Samantha didn't feel the same way. As the questions flowed, I raised my hands to request stillness. Ladies and gentlemen, I said. I need to discuss this quietly with my family and friends. Please respect that. I exited the pole barn, leaving Ethan to control the press. How did it go? Charlie asked. I felt weary. The excitement had worn off and realism had set in. My marriage was finished. My wife had frequently misled me, and the world would now be watching the scandal. Jenny embraced me, tears running down her cheeks. You really deserved better, David, she replied. I embraced her back, trying to hold back my emotions. By midday, the reporters had departed and the band had arrived in the driveway. Steve inquired if there was any news, and Ethan said that Clark would arrive in about an hour. Charlie said that nothing had been determined and urged that we wait to hear Clark's response. When Clark came, he presented a recording deal from Columbia. The initial conditions were not favorable, but they offered incentives for large sales. It was almost as nice as what Leadfoot had been promised, which was astonishing considering his track record. Clark underlined that my participation was critical. When I questioned whether Leadfoot was finished, Clark said it was due to Samantha's public remark. He said that even if we lost Gregory, they would not re-sign Leadfoot, but in light of the present difficulties, Clark also noted that adding a new band member and dealing with composition would be risky. Clark informed Charlie that Columbia wanted all 5 members of the band, not just David and Charlie. They trusted in our collective chemistry and recognized promise in our distinct sound, despite the danger. Clark expected the payout to come from the joint efforts of the whole band. Charlie accepted, but he had a condition. He wanted a 2-year commitment with 2 albums, and if things didn't work out or affected his family, he wanted the opportunity to drop the 3rd record. Will, Steve, and Rob all agreed, and I did too. Charlie made it apparent that his family came first, and Clark expressed worry about how this would affect the terms. Charlie offered that if we continued together, Clark would have an automatic option for a 4th album on the same conditions as the 3rd, with Charlie having no right to withdraw. Clark considered it and promised to return after lunch for a response. When Clark departed, Jenny inquired about the transaction. Charlie said it was a fantastic deal, and she turned to me and asked if I would look after her. I glanced at everyone, Charlie, Ethan, Rob, Will, and Steve, to see whether I was in or out. Grace stood in the kitchen doorway with her kid, her face inscrutable. I wanted to get some air, so I went outdoors. Grace joined me 10 minutes later, stating Charlie was excited to rejoin the band. He regretted leaving and has been trying to get back in with the new tunes. I told her it was all overwhelming and I needed time to process. She told me that Charlie and Jenny loved and would be there for me, and that the band might provide a diversion. Then I asked Grace how she would react if I went back on the road. She did not flinch and claimed it didn't matter as she grabbed my hand and walked me to the woods. She made it plain that there was no us, just me and her. I remained mute as Grace explained that, although she liked me, we were no longer the same people and had scarcely known one other before. I was clinging to past memories and illusions. She recognized my want to get to know her better, but she refused to jump into anything with me while my marriage was falling apart. She also cited her kid and her desire to avoid more trouble. I got her point, but I kissed her anyhow. Her first amazement subsided as she began kissing back, then she backed away unhappy. She reprimanded me, but I thanked her for giving me something positive to look forward to. She softened, held me hard, and told me that this would be all she had for a time. Back inside, everyone in the living room turned to see Grace and I enter. She sat on the couch, leaving room for me next to her. I sat down, looked at her, then the others. "I've made some decisions and have a few demands," I said. Rob and Steve gave another high five, and Will pumped his fist, evidently delighted. I hoped they were prepared for what was ahead. I informed Charlie that I would no longer be running the band. Instead, they would make choices and then present them to me for approval. I didn't want to be in control or make the decisions anymore. Ethan and Charlie seemed perplexed. I said that Leadfoot had placed too much responsibility solely on my shoulders and that I wanted to transfer the load. I wanted them to make the judgments and keep me informed without engaging me in every detail. Charlie asked whether I wanted the ability to veto anything. I stressed that all I wanted to do was approve significant choices and be informed about the direction we were headed. I didn't care about tiny issues like dinner reservations or employment decisions. To minimize divisiveness, I highlighted the need of reaching agreement on critical choices. I wanted to be up to speed on choices without being personally part in the process. Charlie and the men agreed on the conditions. I made it apparent that I couldn't handle choices right now, so they'd have to make them and keep me informed. Songwriting would be done separately and everyone would get a chance. Will and Rob agreed, and Charlie nodded hesitantly while staring at Jenny. Clark returned with basic agreements for our lawyers and Columbia agreed with Charlie's demands. My situation remained between Ethan and the band. In only 5 days, ID left a huge rock band, a high-profile marriage, and was launching a new band with a new lineup. Meanwhile, I couldn't stop thinking about why Samantha had deceived me and if I'd ever be able to start again with someone like Grace. The following day, around midday, Charlie and I were finishing off 2 songs that we had been working on since Sunday night. By Monday at 11, Will, Rob, and Steve had joined us in the pole barn to work on the first song. When I returned, Will shocked us with a new arrangement, transforming a slow ballad into a rockabilly song with dual vocals and a lively mix of instruments. It was a fresh direction, yet it complemented the new lineup nicely. Charlie was the first to glimpse her. I was preoccupied with Rob and the rhythm guitar when Charlie's lead line finished in a shriek. I turned to face him, only to see his gaze dart to the door. "Hey, David," Samantha said. She looked dreadful, according to what Ethan told me last night before he left and Jenny stated this morning. The media was having a field day with her problems. It seemed that the private investigators' findings had been validated and fresh scandals were emerging virtually every hour. "What do you need?" I inquired, my voice harsh. "Guys," Charlie said. "How about we go up to the home for a bit?" Rob and Steve moved away quickly, looking Samantha over as they went. "I figured if you played your cards properly, you may have a shot with her." When we were alone, I perched on a stool and waited her out. I made no attempt to conceal my rage or disgust, and she seemed hesitant to leave the pole barn's entrance. She then murmured something, which I couldn't hear. "What did you say?" I asked. "I was asking if you could call off the dogs now," she continued, tears streaming down her cheeks. This seems real, considering her customary lack of tears on demand. "Tell them to stop." "You have made your point." "I didn't start this fight," I responded, my voice rising. "And now you, the one who spread the rumor that I was the unfaithful spouse, have the nerve to ask me to do something you didn't even do for me." "It wasn't my idea," she said. "Janice made me do it." I understood right once that her manager had been behind it. She said you'd destroy me unless I took action. "That is rubbish," I roared. "She must have told you that you could convert a negative circumstance into something positive, right?" Samantha did not attempt to refute it. "You were leaving me," I said. "You were cheating on me," I said back. Her rage sliced through her tears. "Get over yourself," she snapped. "You already knew." I was astonished. "How can you think like that? Have you not read the tabloids?" She said. "They published almost every rumor regarding who I was dating. But you refused each of them." I stopped asking after a while because I thought it was just typical nonsense, I told him. She remained mute, brushing away tears and avoiding eye contact. "Seriously, Samantha, are you with Gregory?" I asked. "You must have known I was completely unaware." She nodded. "So why do you think I know about the others?" You knew I was going to be upset. That's why you kept it hidden. So you knew I'd be furious about the others, right? She nodded again, no longer attempting to pretend. I don't care how many were there, I said. Does it really matter? Samantha's look indicated that she knew she had spoken too much. Can't we get over this, David, she pleaded. If I stop now, can we get through this? I laughed. Her face grew angry as she was rejected. Let me ask you something, Samantha, I said. Imagine you discover that every time someone comes to your home, they take something, not once, but hundreds of times. What if you found out? Would you welcome them back? This isn't about houseguests, David, she said. This is our marriage, I said. Exactly, I said. You grabbed something far more important than silverware, Samantha. You depleted my self-esteem. You damaged something that I believed was wonderful. Now I'm not sure whether we ever had a legitimate marriage. I wonder whether you ever genuinely loved me, or if I was simply another attempt to improve your image. Her tears began to pour again. You were never just a publicity stunt, she lamented. I have adored you since we first met. More than anybody else, David. You must believe that. That's not true, I said. You've always loved yourself more than you've loved me. Her reply indicated that I had struck a nerve. So what you said on the phone earlier, she said. Is that true? Yeah, Samantha, I affirm. I've stayed faithful to you from the start. She nodded, brushing away her tears and sniffing. You're right, she acknowledged. She chuckled coldly, I'm not good enough for you. Honestly, I wouldn't stay married to me either. She approached and delicately stroked my face. Please, David, for old time's sake, have Ethan call off the dogs and the divorce will proceed in accordance with the prenups. I inquired, no lengthy legal battles. Are there no more assaults in the media? She grinned and nodded. I swear. I thought about it. What about my belongings from the house, I asked. They are in my car, she said, pointing toward the driveway. I pondered for a minute. Why not? I believed this would get things done swiftly and with little fuss. There was no need to return to Los Angeles and I could finish with her with only a few autographs. Most significantly, it seemed that her public image had already been sufficiently tarnished and Gregory was now a distant memory. All fine, I responded. We'll file for divorce right now, claiming irreconcilable differences. I'd want to receive the proposed settlement documents by next Monday and then it's finished. Can you handle that? She held me and murmured, I promise, quietly. I moved back from the embrace. Can you call them off now? The sooner I obtain the documents, the quicker Ethan will back off. She wasn't delighted, but her look indicated that she was receiving a better bargain than she anticipated. Thanks, David, she said gently. She leaned forward and kissed my cheek. I stared at her for the final time as my wife. Yes, Samantha, I'm truly sorry, she responded, her eyes welling up with tears again. I didn't mean to hurt you, and I still love you. I gulped hard, opting to call off the dogs for now and deal with any problems later if she didn't fulfill her word. She maintained her promise, however. The settlement paperwork arrived the following morning by courier. So there was the whirlwind of 5 wild days. Gregory declared bankruptcy around 18 months ago, sold his expensive properties, and now lives in a modest Malibu home. He works at a studio and is sometimes spotted with a starlet. Vince, our drummer, left music behind after making some wise bets. He currently lives in Scotland, where he paints and plays golf. He has shown an interest in joining us on an album for some dual percussion, similar to the vintage Allman Brothers. Our previous lead guitarist, John Bumer, is now the producer. He's doing well, collaborating with Charlie and Will on exciting new songs and producing other artists in Nashville and Los Angeles. He's happy to be off the road. Samantha's career suffered after our divorce and she was fired from her program when viewership plunged. Her reputation suffered as a result of her fast divorce and the silence of the press. She still appears in modest parts, but her position as America's darling has faded. Rob ended up with her, and he told me they spent the whole night chatting about me, even during their most personal moments. I simply chuckled when he said it, despite his shame. The Mustang Ranch in Nevada attempted to sue us over their name, but we refused to back down. Meanwhile, Will continued to bring his Basset Hound, General Beauregard, to practice. We felt it would make an excellent band name, but we weren't calling ourselves after the Confederate commander. 5 months later, General Beauregard's first album, Another Happy Face, was released to high praise. It sold 8 million copies, including 2 #1 rock songs and 3 top 10 country successes. Our second album, Saturday Night Drive-In, was released with our first big tour. It became Diamond, selling 11 million copies in little over a year. The tour sold out before it even began, and the reviews were even more positive than those for the record. Charlie is handling things nicely, taking Jenny and the girls on a trip in their own bus. I sometimes join them to work on songs, but with all the noise from the kids, it's difficult to get anything done. So the kids, Charlie's daughters, Bryden and Walter. Walter, as reported in People, was born 10 months ago to David and Grace Harlan, a local success story. But it was all a PR hoax by Ethan and his colleagues. The true story is little more convoluted. It took almost 8 months after that weekend for Grace to agree on a date, and even longer for her to accept my proposal. Grace has already kept me on my toes, and I hope she continues to surprise me with new ways to keep things fascinating. We live near to Charlie, Jenny, and their children, living a regular life in Grant City where everyone knows us and isn't affected by our celebrity. He'll keep Walter's tail for another time, but he has forgiven me and is sending his best. That is the story. Do you believe David made the correct decision? Let us know in the comments and remember to like and subscribe.